Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
Good to go? All right. Welcome to Revolution. Jay is still in Belfast. He'll be back on Tuesday, I think. But anyhow, so I'm talking. We had Curtis talk last week, and I'm talking this week. I was actually last week in Kansas. I hadn't seen my mom. I hadn't seen any of my family in 8 months, which is a pretty long time. I love my family, and I missed them a lot, and I got to see them. My mom bought me these sweet threads that I'm wearing. Got these fancy new shoes, these pants. I keep getting fatter and fatter, so my wardrobe keeps getting smaller and smaller, the wearable clothing. So it was nice to get some clothes that are nice and colorful that I can wear. So, anywho, also, when I was in Kansas, I had some thoughts that I jotted down and that I ended up making into this talk for today. So we're going to talk about something that was a part of Jay's message and Revolution's message that initially really attracted me to Revolution. The idea of accepting that you're accepted, of acceptance. I know in my experience and in the experience of a lot of you all that I've had personal conversations with in the evangelical world that a lot of us come from, that can be something that is not present in the diet that you're fed by evangelicalism a lot of the times, is a lack of, I guess, verbal acknowledgement that you're accepted. And maybe it's said, maybe it's glossed over, maybe it's not even just the verbal side of it, maybe it's just it feeling it and it being evident that you're accepted. And so I thought I'd kind of give a little bit of background about myself and why this message was so important to a person like me, coming from where I was coming from. So I would say I used to feel maybe suffocated by constant thoughts about a paternal God, a kind of silly term. I think I'm hilarious sometimes. I make up these little silly terms, but a silly term that I use is like a sky man, like this paternal, angry God in the sky, watching down on us from the clouds and judging and stuff. I used to feel like suffocated by those thoughts. I was obsessed, honestly, kind of trying to decode his, he, male pronoun, his attributes and his motives behind his plan. He had this big plan in his omniscience and his omnipotence, omnipresence, all the omnis, omni, meta omni. And I was obsessed about his plan because in my mind, my understanding of this God was that he was very angry, and I was scared of this angry, all-powerful sky man. And I lived in fear a lot. In my mind, he would decide my eternal fate, and there were two polar opposite fates, two polar opposite consequences, eternal ones. One being bliss forever and ever and ever, and one being literal, torture, like having, dying constantly in the most horrific and painful ways. I lived in fear. I was very scared. I felt like he was testing me, and I failed a lot. I've talked about this a little bit, but especially in my early to mid-teenage years, I dealt a lot with, suicidal thoughts and tendencies and self-harm, and I used to hurt myself quite a lot. I still have scars. Some of these tattoos are actually, I have some patches tattooed on me of kind of some of the most extreme scars that I gave myself. Just a little stick and poke patch, tattoos of patches, just to remind myself that, the scars will always be there, but we can kind of patch ourselves up. And I always use the phrasing like build something out of the wreckage, I guess. At one point, like I said, I felt like I failed all the time. And at one point, probably the most brutal thing I ever did to myself was I took a pair of scissors, and they were like the type that you'd use on paper, so it wasn't just like a thin blade, it was kind of a chunky blade. And I carved the word fail into my leg. very, very deeply. It's still there. There were chunks of my flesh that I tore out of my leg. And I think honestly that I felt that I disappointed someone who I cared about in my life. I think it might have been like a teacher or a family member or something, or someone I was romantically involved with. I can't remember the specifics, but it was something like that. And I felt there was an impossible standard that I had to perform and meet up to. And after, some therapy and at first I only saw, I guess, Christian, quote unquote, Christian or church approved counselors and therapists and things like that. But I was very lucky because they were all very understanding and very loving and very open-minded. But I came to realize that a part of why I hurt myself so much was feeling, it was like a penance kind of thing, feeling that I needed to pay, that, almost like a blood sacrifice kind of exchange. And there's a lot of other things that go into that, like the endorphins and things. But in my mind, there was an exchange that had to happen. There was blood that had to be shed for me falling short. And so, yeah, I just kind of give that story to say I was in a toxic cycle. And honestly, I think that maybe this season that I had of an extreme unhealthy obsession over, in my mind, what had to be an objective, quantifiable existence, a almost verifiable existence of this God. I think maybe that my season of being so extremely entrenched in that mindset is maybe something I'm still reacting to. Because I think I've swung pretty far in an opposite direction. And I think that a lot of that is probably me still reacting to the other extreme that I was once on. But that's just me kind of trying to be objective, because I know I'm an intense and extreme person sometimes, and I wonder if that factors in to where I'm at right now. Anyway, but what I feel like what life experience has shown me, and I'm going to use some vocabulary that I don't always use today. Consciously, I'm going to choose to use some vocabulary, but maybe what we could say is what a God-granted life experience. Because if God is, powerful and omnipotent and things like that, then any life experience, is God-granted and is, depending on how you feel about an interventionist God, is intentional from that God. But what my life experience has shown me is that people are loving. And I always talk about this. I obsess over my understanding of like the body of Christ, the people. I'm obsessed with the idea of Christ. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But that's probably also reactionary too, because whereas I was obsessed with this judgmental, rule-based, kind of an asshole of a God, I'm now lean more into the idea of a graceful, loving, accepting, inclusive, affirming God in Christ. And like I said, I'm using terms I don't always use, but what life experience has shown me is people loving me and people hurting me and me hurting people and me loving people. And people making absurd choices that are sometimes negative, but sometimes absurd choices like showing love and like showing grace. Because grace is kind of absurd. We talk about that a lot, and I know Caputo talks about that a lot, and Jay references that. But love is pretty absurd in that it is illogical often, and it kind of mandates a lack of logic. Unconditional love is particularly, you can't. There's not like a mathematical formula where it's like, oh yeah, that person deserves chance and chance, time and time again. But that's kind of the beauty of it. And so when people show me these things, and when I observe these things and I show these things to people, like I said, negative or positive, hurting people or loving people, I think that is us building the kingdom. And I think that we are building the kingdom, and that there is a second coming, and that's what that is. That's how I have come to parse out that language in a way I can understand, is that that we are building the kingdom, and in a sense, if we are the body of Christ, then we are the second coming of Christ. In a sense, I think that people on both the conservative and progressive side of Christianity could easily, take offense or poke holes in that, and I would too. But like I said, I'm kind of using some language that I don't usually use. But yeah, I think that we are building the kingdom, and that if we are Christ, then we are the second coming of Christ. Which really just kind of boils down to me trying to use that language while saying I don't think I don't think anyone who thinks this is less intelligent or anything like that. But I don't think that there's going to be a day where Jesus descends from the clouds. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? So I think that in us, the body, I think that Christ is made flesh in the body of Christ in us. So Jay's message of acceptance and accepting that you're accepted really hit home, I guess, for me, really struck a chord. That's why a lot of times, I'm a very emotional person. I cry a lot. But whenever Jay's up here talking about accepting that we're accepted, a lot of times that's like you'll see me back there just like tearing up and stuff, because that's a really potent message for me, especially coming from a place where, and Vicky and I on the way here, we're talking about negative self-thoughts, but I still have those cycles of negative self-thoughts, and I haven't been in danger of acting on any impulses or anything like that for a very long time, which I'm very grateful for. But I still have those cycles still pop up. But I guess my message today, what I wanted to say to anyone listening, right, to you all right here in front of me, and to anyone listening online, and it's something that I would say to myself back when I was going, or that I wish I could have said to myself, that I had heard more often back then when I was going through all those dangerous cycles of behavior, is you are accepted. And you are accepted by God. And again, I'm using terms of, I won't keep giving that disclaimer, but yeah, I think it's important to hear, even if you don't always fully swallow it, even if you don't always fully digest it. I think it's important to hear a reminder that you are accepted. And I think maybe now, I talked about like kind of reanalyzing and redefining our understandings of God. The only way that I can use words like God is by having redefined from that angry sky man that I was referencing earlier. But so I guess maybe we should kind of parse out or pick apart, define a little bit what I mean when I say accepted by God. So I'm going to use some scripture here. Got this also when I was back in Kansas, a physical Bible. I've lost mine, but this is a similar one. This is an ESV. I usually prefer either New Living or ESV, but so we're going to read from John 14. I think John 14 is kind of cool because it makes reference to the Trinity, I guess, which, that term's never used in the Bible, but if you're looking for it, it's definitely there, talking about God as a Father, God as the Son, God as the Spirit. So I think, let's see, how do I want to do this? I'll give my kind of definition, and then I'll read from the scripture a little bit to kind of draw some lines or connect some dots. So God as the Father, as the parent, is an invisible, intangible entity. We do see visible and touch tangible things that arise and shift around us, reacting to this idea of the parent. But the parent themselves isn't tangible or visible. I think the Father, God the Father, I'll just use that term Father, represents authority and law, especially in the Old Testament. The figurehead of God in the Old Testament is often distant and mysterious, maybe clear in ideal, but confusing and kind of murky in application. Like, there's the Ten Commandments, this kind of, well, at least the abridged version of the Ten Commandments is a simple, kind of straightforward, easily defined, you shall not do this, you shall not do that. But then in application, things get muddy. I mean, with laws, we talk a lot about legislation here, especially when Kurt's here, but we have to have laws, we have to have rules of order, I guess, but then in application, there's a lot of gray area, a lot of murkiness. But I think that God, as the Father, kind of represents that. And throughout the Bible, everyone's always trying to grasp what God is, what the Father is. There's always a wrestling back and forth. And I think John 14 here kind of exemplifies that. So it's just a little background. It's Jesus talking about how he's going to leave them soon. He's going to die. So we're going to start with 14:1. That's Jesus talking. The old red letters. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come again, and I'll take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also, and you know the way to where I'm going. So this is talking about God the Father. And then Thomas says to him, I love Thomas, Lord, we do not know the way to where you're going. How can we know the way? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you'd known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you do know him and have seen him. So I was grasping after understanding the Father, understanding God. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and it's enough for us. Jesus said, have I been with you so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Do you not believe that I am in the Father, and the Father's in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does his works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father's in me, or else believe on account of the works themselves. So yeah, and that kind of bleeds a little bit into the Son, too, equating the Father with the Son. I'm going to get to the Son here in a second, but I want to talk about the Spirit for a second. So the Spirit is another intangible, invisible representation of God, or a person of God in evangelical language. And again, pardon my language if I say any triggering words like that, but yeah, a person of God, I guess, is the word the church uses a lot. And I remember, like, the metaphor, you guys might remember this, of the wind. Like, we don't see the wind, we can't touch the wind, but we see what it affects. We see it around us. We see things reacting to it. So that is visible and tangible, but the wind itself is not. I think the Spirit as, the helper, or maybe more abstractly, the dynamic that kind of governs our complex internal and maybe external economy, in which we like tally scores and we engage in transactions and we, kind of metaphysically barter and trade and settle scores and collect and pay debts. And I think that the Spirit kind of can usher in a pragmatic application of the theories and the laws and the formulas that are built around our theologies and our theories about God the Father. So it's kind of, I think of the Spirit as like this dynamic that governs, almost like, like gravity or something. It's the dynamic governing the laws that we use to do our exchanges with other people, I guess. It's kind of an abstract way to put it. But, so yeah, I left off around here in John 14. I'm just going to read through a little bit more of this about the Spirit. So this is all Jesus giving a nice little monologue and reacting to Thomas and Philip a couple times. But then he says, in verse 15, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments, and I'll ask the Father, and he will give you another helper. There he is, the Holy Spirit, to be with you forever. Even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it neither sees him nor knows him. You know him, for he dwells with you and will be in you. So it's kind of cool. It kind of runs right into talking about the Spirit there, and explaining to the disciples who never fully understand it, never fully connect all the dots about what Christ is trying to tell them about the nature of God and the nature of himself and the nature of us, the nature of the Spirit. I guess that's why we're still talking about all this stuff, among other reasons. And then the third person of the Trinity, again, the Christ, the Son. And this is the one that I talk about all the time. I feel like all my sermons or my talks come down to talking about the body. But yeah, that's where I'm at. So the Son, the Christ, the visible and tangible. So this is an element of God that when the person of Yahushua, of Jesus of Nazareth, was walking around, was a person, a physical, tangible person. And I think that concept carries on into our current, quote-unquote, relationship with or understanding of of the Christ in the body, in each other. Maybe not divorcing ourselves from the idea of a perfect Christ, but seeing that human is imperfect, and we are imperfect, but we can still be Christ to each other, and we can still learn from each other. We can nourish each other. We can dress each other's wounds. We can help each other. We can see and touch each other, and we can talk to each other. We can receive grace from and show grace to the body, to Christ, in evident and practical ways that, maybe are ushered in through this idea of the Spirit. But Christ is, in this understanding, Christ is God made flesh, is God as a human, the Son of God, the child of God, the Son of Man. The Word, as John says in the first chapter of his book, the Word, made flesh, and the least of these. So this metaphysical, transcendent force that the world is created through, and the least of these. Back to Matthew 25 that I'm always talking about, the homeless person that we feed, the sick person that we visit, the prisoner, the felon who we go and visit in jail, the prostitute who's beaten, the depressed person who, tries to hurt themselves or overdose, and the person who comes to their aid. Christ is the community, the body, composed of many members. For example, the body's made of many members, all have different roles. And so you could be the hands that massage me the shoulders when I'm tired and sore and aching. You could be the hands that wash me the feet with warm water when I'm dirty and I'm filthy. Or this is all very, I should have condensed this a little bit, but I could be the feet that carry you the mouth from location to location to where the message of your words are most needed, where you need to be heard. And so I've given a talk before about the roles of the different members of the body and how, and I think, we shift in our roles and how we relate with each other. But I think that is Christ being Christ to us, and us being Christ to each other, and others being Christ to us in the body, and our roles as the members of the body. But back to my point of being accepted, I'll say it again. You are accepted by God. You are accepted by God. And if you do not regularly experience that in an absolute and unconditional way, if you don't experience that unconditional acceptance by the Father, the law around you, the judge, even the law internally inside your head that holds you to expectations and standards, if you don't experience that unconditional acceptance by the Spirit, the ecosystem around you or inside of you, the system of exchanges and interactions, and if you don't experience that unconditional acceptance by the Christ, the Son, the body, the community around you, if you're not experiencing that unconditional, regular, evident acceptance, then I think that it's probably time to re-examine, and I'm saying this to myself as a 16-year-old, is kind of how I'm approaching this. It's time for you to re-examine and maybe even reevaluate your understanding and redefine your vocabulary of God, of your God, of this construct of God, of your understanding of God. And the point of this message, at least this, maybe, I don't know, I see some pretty crazy stuff sometimes, but the point that I'm getting at is not that you need to throw away God and make yourself a new God, make yourself a golden calf that you can see and touch, but that you need to re-examine your understanding of God. Because a God that doesn't show you constant acceptance, a law, a father, an economy, a spirit, a son, a community, a body that doesn't show you constant acceptance, not licensed to do whatever you want, not licensed to make the stupid decisions you want, not licensed to hurt yourself and others around you, but acceptance. Love. There's tough love, there's soft love, there's warm and fuzzy love, there's harsh love. But if you're not experiencing true sincere, raw love and acceptance and grace, then you need to re-examine your God. And if you have to step away from words like God for an indefinite amount of time, maybe permanently, not saying to resolve to do that, but if that's what it takes for you to get some fresh air from a toxic atmosphere that is hurting you, that is choking you, that is suffocating you, then maybe you need to do that. Maybe you need to step away from that. Well, you do. You know what you do? You need to step away from that. And I think it's important too, if it doesn't sit right with you, if your understanding of God doesn't sit right with you, if it doesn't add up, then you can make a healthy, conscious change. And that can be scary. And you can lose your community. But maybe that community is broken and hurting you. And maybe that community can even benefit from you cessating yourself from it and from stepping away from it. But self-care is really important. And a part of that, I think, I think a big part of that is acknowledging if you are in an unhealthy, toxic situation and making a choice to step away. And you know what? You're not going to get shocked by a lightning bolt for doing that. God's not going to have the earth swallow you up, be all pissed at you. And you know what? If he did, screw that guy. Who's going to be so mad at you for being honest with yourself and saying, this isn't adding up. This isn't making sense to me. If that sky man has the earth swallow you up right away and damns you forever and ever for questioning something that didn't sit right with you, with the heart that he gave you, that they gave you, that they created you with, then screw that. You don't need that. And you know what? I've done it and it's not going to happen. You're not going to get struck by a lightning bolt. God wrestles with us and that makes us stronger. And we wrestle with each other and that makes us stronger. Or we get hurt and then we walk away and say, I can't do this wrestling match right now. Like when we talk about interacting with people with staunchly different opinions and political perspectives and things like that. It's good to engage with those things, and if you have the strength and the energy and the resources to wrestle with those people, then that can be productive. But self-care and boundaries are important, and sometimes you just got to say, I need to step away from this. I guess that's my edgy thing is if God's not adding up to you, then step away. And I'm not saying that as an angry punk rock man, screw God, dude. I'm saying your understanding is toxic. I'm not saying God's toxic. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm saying that your understanding, if it is hurting you, please, as someone who's been there, take a look at things. Yeah, if I guess I'm kind of just summarizing here. If love and grace are not apparent to you by your external influences, the voices that you hear around you in your community, by the voices in your head, which that's the big thing, is accepting yourself and realizing maybe my understanding of myself is flawed. My understanding maybe of God, of my community, of myself, though, I think is a really important one. Maybe my understanding of myself is flawed. If I'm not accepting myself, then I need to take some inventory. I got to do that all the time, you all. I that's a big one for me. I have a real hard time accepting myself. I can logically, and that takes maybe taking a breath and slowing down and saying, okay, logically, like Jay says all the time, would I say this to someone that I love? Would I say this to a friend? Would I say this to an enemy? And if the answer is no, and I'm still saying it to myself, I need to take inventory. I need to slow down and take a breath. Yeah, I guess I'll wrap this up and then we can chit-chat if y'all want. And this one I'm going to have to pull out my phone for because I put part of my sermon notes in my phone. But revolution makes me feel accepted. And my point there is not to tell everyone that they will feel accepted by revolution or that is the most healthy source for these things, for this body, for this Christ or whatever. But for me, it is. And I'm not going to hit anyone over the head with anything, with a flyer for revolution or with the Bible or with anything like that. I'm just saying that coming from my inherited vocabulary of Christianity and my understanding of things and the resources that I have, the revolution is a way to re-examine some things and to find grace and love and acceptance and raw, real community for me. And that's why I'm in Minnesota. is I fell in love with Revolution. And yeah, I feel acceptance, and I see acceptance here in this collective, in this group, in the back to this I don't know why I got stuck on the Trinity with this talk, but it just for some reason I just went down a rabbit hole. But yeah, I feel acceptance from this authority, from this Father, from this metaphysical atmosphere, the Spirit, from this body, this physical community. I feel accepted. I feel radically accepted here. And I'm also challenged to work on myself. I'm not saying a fluffy, froofy, like, be you and just wherever the wind takes you. I am challenged here. I am held accountable here. And I am accepted here. And there's no conflict between those things. I am accepted and I am held accountable. And I hope that you do too. And I think that the people here and the people listening, I know it's honestly some people listen for weird reasons. There's some people who really disagree, adamant with us, but they still listen, and that's great. But I hope that everyone here and everyone hearing this does feel accepted here. And we work towards that at Revolution. I guess if we were to have a mission statement, which is a funny term, a very Western term, kind of sounds like it has evangelical roots also, but if we had a mission statement, it would probably be something around acceptance, accepting that you're accepted and being embraced. And if you don't feel that warm, unconditional acceptance, and like I said, not unconditional endorsement of any choice you make, but of acceptance of you as a human, if you don't feel radically accepted as a human here, then please find somewhere where you do. I'm not pitching a cure-all. I'm saying that this works for me, and if it doesn't work for you, then please know that. Maybe you try to figure out why it doesn't or what you want different, and go find that thing. Go find that community. But there is a wealth, I think, of support and acceptance and love and grace here at Revolution. And not in a one-way transaction coming from the microphone or the stage to you, but it is an exchange. There's a lot of love here. And for me, it fits. It's really important. It resonates, I guess. But like our pride flyers say, and Robert helped with this tagline, what was it, Robert? It's right there, but it's on the back. We can put that in the afterglow maybe. But it's like we're here if you need us, kind of thing. We don't have all the, that's what it was. We don't have all the answers, but we're here if you need us. Yeah, and that's another great example. That was a collective thing with the people in this room. You know, the afterglows, we talk about things like this. We kind of marinate in these thoughts, and then Robert helped me hash out the wording of that, and then Kurt and I wound up at Pride handing those flyers out. You know, we're the body. We're a flawed body. We're a broken body. We're a human body. But we're a body. Oh yeah, the last thing I wanted to say is that I think reclaiming things, this is something we've been talking about maybe for the past year or so here at Revolution, is reclaiming things. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this talk, is reclaim some things. The faith of my fathers, the faith of my culture, the faith of those who came before me is no more valid than my faith. And that's something I need to say to myself. This is my Christianity. It is no less valid than the larger versions. And this probably sounds a little bit defensive. I don't mean it to be defensive. I mean it to be affirming. That a lot of times when I post things Christian adjacent, you know, on Instagram or something like that, I get attacked and I get self-conscious. But I think it's worth affirming to ourselves and to each other that our faith and our understanding of God and the way that we're approaching these things is no less valid than the people who give us crap. Okay? And I'm not saying that to be, like I said, I'm not intending to be defensive. I'm intending to be positive. And their faith is no less valid than ours, you know? But I think it's important to remind ourselves, because we're a little ragtag group here. we're a minority in some ways. We're all white people, ish, but yeah, what we're doing here is no less valid of a form of faith or of Christianity or whatever, fill in the blank, than any other. And I'm saying that to remind myself, like I said, because I'll have conversations with more mainstream Christians like, oh, you're a progressive, or oh, you're this or this or that. Yeah, I am, okay? And I get ashamed of that sometimes. I get self-conscious of that. But you know, I am. And that's great. I like it a lot better than any other flavor that I've had of anything like this. Yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. And we'll do an afterglow. I'm going to try to say a prayer again. I think I did one last time. I'm going to try to do that again. All right. God, here we are. Help us build this kingdom, this vision. Help us affirm each other. Help us love each other. Help us discern appropriate ways to show love to each other. Help us challenge each other and ourselves. Help us accept each other and ourselves. Help us stay positive and move onward and upward. Help us remind ourselves that we are constantly accepted and to hold ourselves to a standard where we go out of our way to make sure that we feel that affirmation and we feel that acceptance. Because you're love, and we experience you when we engage in love, and we build a kingdom when we engage in love. And I don't know if that kingdom will ever be fully built, but help us in that practice to be proactive, to show love and build a better world around us. Amen. We're not for profit, so there's that. And we always play that message at the end of the podcasts. And now we're going to have Afterglow. Recording Kurt. Cool. Any thoughts?
I kind of like what you said about if you need to step away from God for a while, do it. Mm-hmm. It kind of reminded me of, it's a silly comparison, but you know, at the beginning of the year, it's all about the health trend and people going through their cleanses and dieting. It's kind of like you've been fed all this crap, right? You're feeding yourself crap, you know, from the environment, and you feel like you need a detox, so you take a break from all that.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel like the comparison is. You're taking a break from all that crap, mm-hmm. and then you're stepping away from. It's not that the toxicity is God Himself. It's the toxicity of the the concept of God. Mm-hmm. So you're taking a step back from what you've been raised up with and what you've been told. Detox yourself from those thoughts and preconceptions, and then rediscover a healthier God.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I like that a lot, man.
Yeah.
It's real. Yeah. It's good. Detox from your misunderstandings or something, maybe.
Yeah.
I think there is a place where you can re-engage with those things, but it can be, you need to prioritize sometimes, Like I said, the worst panic attack I've ever had was going back to my parents' evangelical church. I'd like to get to a place where I can do that healthily, but sometimes you just gotta, it's like, I'm still flushing out those toxins right now. And I hope when I was talking about like the self-harming and things like that, I hope that it didn't sound like I was blaming the church or the toxic forms of Christianity. That's all a me thing. That's my baggage and stuff. I know there was a time where I blamed, like, oh, they taught me this performance-based faith or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to get at. So I hope that's. Maybe I should have said that more clearly, but that's not. I don't blame anyone for that. So.
Yeah, I feel like when I used to go to church, I also didn't really get the sense that I would be accepted no matter who I portrayed myself as or like what I revealed to the people that were there in the churches that I was growing up in. But at the same time, I feel like I likely didn't give it enough of a chance to allow them to try to accept me. I feel like I was veiled and held back parts of my life because I had the assumption that I wouldn't be accepted if I articulated those types of things. And it's nice that there is a group like this where it seems like that there's a very heavy emphasis that it's okay to open up and talk about parts of your life that are less mainstream, or one would have the connotation doesn't belong in a church setting or something like that. But yeah, I think that it very well could have been a good experience for both myself and the people at my church of my upbringing had I made the attempt, but it seemed like a risky endeavor to be like, hey, I started drinking and, I'm 19 or something like that. It's not a topic that would seem like a healthy thing to bring up. Like, hey, I'm breaking the law.
Right.
But it probably would have been helpful to have a community where I could have talked about that type of thing in a group. But yeah, I did the time out thing, I would say. Perhaps I'm still doing that now. But it seems to me like a healthy move to emphasize acceptance and in your communities and in the way that you perceive the reality in general, that it's an accepting place and authenticity should be encouraged because it's not as scary as you think it's going to be when you portray an authentic self to other people or to the world at large.
Yeah, and I think when you portray an authentic self, you realize that you're not alone in that situation, and there's others that maybe have quietly gone through the same thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's tricky. Anybody else? Anybody else going through doubts? No, you're not going to see a lot of hands shoot up in youth group, and it's like, well, not too sure about all this. Anybody else? But then people in the back of their heads, and maybe you're emboldening people down the road to be like, you know what? Maybe being open, connecting with other people about my hidden flaws or doubts or whatever you want to call them, can be encouraging, productive, I guess.
I think, if you think of when you were talking about the body, like the foot does something, the mouth does something. I'm thinking about the mind of the Christian church in America. And I know that Jesus is the head, so it's supposed to be his mind. But it's like, it seems to me like generally the church in America has complex PTSD, in that it is in that mind frame where it's always beating itself up. It's always judging itself or judging the other people in the church, or really hating its body in a sense because it's not perfect. That's what we do. We have this image, this body image of what we're supposed to be, and we beat ourselves up if we don't meet that standard. And that's kind of how the church is. It's like we're just tearing ourselves apart.
That's really good, yeah.
But I'm thinking, I was listening to John Smith again last week. He was the biker that died this year in Australia. And I mean, he, I believe, had the mind of Christ. And he spoke very firmly. He was loving, but he was saying, does the evangelical church, is it even biblically based? Because Jesus was with the poor, and he was standing up for the sick, and he was standing up for women and prostitutes and tax collectors and, a church that separates itself from the rawness and the darkness of life. I mean, Jesus went in there. That's where he was. He was among the people. And when I hear John Smith, just like when I hear you, when I hear Jay, I feel like there's that counterculture, you know. The way things are isn't, it's not acceptable. It's not useful, it's not functional. I don't know if all that made sense, but I just, you know, and John Smith talks about how the people who have spoken out and said the things that Christ said and applied them in the context of the society that they lived in, they get murdered.
You seen that show Good Omens? I've talked with you guys about shows all the time. I'm sure I've brought it up before. It's really good. It's based on a book written by Terry Pratchett. And but anyway, it's about an angel and a demon who, like, they're both assigned to Earth with, you know, humanity, and they've become friends over time, and they both, like, really appreciate all the complexities of humanity and human life and stuff like that. And anyway, the apocalypse is coming, and they don't want it. Neither of them wants it to come because they like being on Earth with humans, I guess, and enjoying human culture and stuff. Anyways, there's a scene where they're watching Jesus getting crucified, and the demon says to the angel, "Well, what did this guy do wrong?" And the angel says, "He told people to love each other." And the demon goes, "Oh yeah, that'll get you killed real quick."
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And oftentimes killed by the religious institution.
Exactly.
Yeah. Or beat up by it, at least.
And a lot of times I think that's because the religious institutions are trying not to upset the political establishment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's why they wanted to arrest Jesus, because he was bucking the status quo, and we have to do that. But in the meantime, like you and Jay said the other week, children are in cages, and it just seems like we can't even work together enough to help them.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times there's so much rhetoric built in, and so many kind of prefab responses when it's like, well, you know, this doesn't seem right church, or, you know, right followers of Christ, and they're like, well, and there's all these built-in walls in their
parents
logic.
should have brought them.
Yeah, the parents should.
About what they're
Right. Yeah. Well, what about these people over here? What about these people over here? Yeah, of course, sure, but that's just missing what I'm asking you, or what we're trying to discuss right now. Any burning desires?
Well, I was going to say, if Christ is the least of these, as you said, then is Christ in cages?
Oh yeah, for sure. Totally.
I just had a quip I wanted.
Christ's in cages.
Yeah.
Has anyone read The Brothers Karamazov?
I don't think so.
Everyone should read The Brothers Karamazov. Maybe you have. It's Dostoevsky. Well, he is considered the greatest novelist of all time by many, because his books are so psychological. And he, in The Brothers Karamazov, there's a little section, and if you just read this, that would be great. It's called The Great Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor. And it's just a short section, a story that someone's telling about, you know, what if Jesus had appeared during the Inquisition in Spain? And in his story he does, and kind of how he's treated, and, you know, the Grand Inquisitor explains why he's arrested him and why he has to kill him, because anyway, it's just very interesting that I think too often that's how it
Yeah. Yeah. Christ would not be popular in a mega church. He probably wouldn't last. He'd probably storm out himself after 5 minutes or something.
You turn the tables.
Yeah, right.
Storm out.
They go up to the soundboard, rip out all the cables, break the projector.
Blow up the Lear jet.
Yeah, right.
Oh, right.
I mean, that just baffles me.
Mm-hmm.
The jets and the mansions.
That people can live with themselves and justify that. But then I try to live with myself within my flaws.
There's a show about that, though. I think it's called The Righteous Gemstones.
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah, I understand. On HBO?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's called Righteous Gemstones, but it's all about like the sort of harkens to the PTL, TBN kind of mega rich, all this kind of stuff that we see, but the followers may not see.
So is it like dark comedy?
It's a comedy, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I've heard a lot of really good stuff. It has a lot of actors I really like.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks for an afterglow, y'all. Yeah, of course.
We'd like to remind you that our ministry is supported 100% by listeners like you. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.